Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to MacGroup Detroit. To all of our members, thank you for helping us get to 30 years. We really appreciate your support over the years. For the people that have been here since day one, we couldn't have done it without you. For everybody that's more recent, like myself, I've only been here for about 15 years. Thank you again. And even the folks that have only been here, maybe this is your first meeting, hopefully you'll want to come back again and become a member as well. Appreciate seeing such a good turnout today. So thank you very much.
Ink cartridge for my image writer. That was it. It was just kind of a round table of people getting up and discussing their new computer and what they liked about it. And then pretty much after the meeting was over, which was pretty short, we actually had, people would bring in shareware on floppy disks, and we would just stand around copying the new shareware applications that anyone had found in that moment. So it was a very, very, very informal meeting. After that, it progressed as the hardware progressed, so did the ability. So once we got the ability to project the image on a screen for more people, then of course the meetings grew. The meeting went from Michigan Avenue over to near the Wayne State campus. I had an office over there. Or actually, no, I didn't have an office there. We could rent a space there. Because we were just running out of room in my office downtown. Right around the time we were probably around 70 members, 60 members at that time. And most people were showing up. So we always had full meetings. And once you got to be about that size, you could then get software companies to come in. So Microsoft would come in and do a demo. Apple would send reps to come out and do demos. And then from there, personally, I decided to do training. So I opened up a training center in Southfield. And of course, I moved the meeting there because then we didn't have to pay rent. You could just use my training facility. And that's the first time, once we moved to Southfield, we broke over 100 members and it just kept growing from there. To the point to where I didn't have enough space in my small basement training facility. So then we started meeting at the Southfield Civic Center, and we outgrew that, and we started meeting at the Bloomfield Township Public Library, and they went under construction, so we were going to lose the space there, and that's how you guys ended up where you are now.
Money problems.
So kind of once we moved out, we never moved back. It was kind of the Birmingham Temple kind of became a nice place to be, and that's kind of where we stuck around.
And it feels like home for us, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we do appreciate your taking time out of your busy day. Sorry you couldn't be up here.
I know, I want to explain that. I really, of course, for the 30th anniversary, want to be there in person. As you know, I moved to Atlanta 2 years ago, and today, in those 2 years, is the first day that both my daughters could be here at the same time. And many of you know the story that when my youngest daughter was born, I left the hospital to go to a MacGroup meeting. Yep. I decided that probably wasn't a good thing to repeat today, so.
Thank you again, Terry. We miss you. Feel free to stop in anytime you do come back up.
I promise I will surprise you in the not too distant future at a meeting.
All right. All right, bye.
Keep the meeting going. I get the emails. I see what's going on the bulletin board, and just keep it going, because the only reason it's going is because of the people in that room right now. If you guys decide to not do it anymore, then it will cease to exist. If you decide to keep it going, then it will keep going, as it always has. So thank you for keeping something that I started 30 years ago, not today, but in the next couple of days, 30 years ago. And thanks for all the effort and volunteerism and all the things that you guys have done to keep it going. I really appreciate it. And continued success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
So today, we're just going to celebrate the 30 years that we've made it through, and hopefully we can look forward to maybe another 30 years worth of this as well. I won't make everybody show up for the 60th, okay?
I'd be glad to.
I'd be happy to as well. Well, I mean, Beth showed up for the 30th,
Yep.
so why can't you?
I think I can do that.
Okay, all right. So we had someone that visited us, Steve Wozniak. He's been here twice. He was unable to join us today because he is in Australia. He is doing a series of talks starting this week, and he is now visiting family in Australia. And obviously family is much more important than coming to a meeting. Ask Terry, because he told us that today. But this was a quote that he had when I spoke with him back in May about either doing a FaceTime chat or coming to the group. He was, let's just put it this way. I emailed him at 10 o'clock at night, just figuring it'll get in his box and maybe in 2-3 weeks, somebody will go through it and say, oh, hey, well, to contact him, you got to do this. I got an email back from him in 15 minutes. I was stunned. And his statement was, yes, I'm very interested. This is very important. I want to be part of this. So he remembers the group. He still stands by the fact that we're one of his favorite Mac user groups. And I think this shows the happiness of him, plus Terry and Mike as well. So really tickled about that. Get that out of the way, sorry. So on with the presentation, because we're going to chug along through this. Please hold any questions till the end of this, because we don't want to chew up too much time, because we've got a number of things going on tonight. First off, 1986, when the group was founded. These were some of the things that I had found that were happening in the world. There was a tabloid newspaper in the UK called Today. They started. They were the first newspaper to be created and produced on personal computers. Not on your traditional hot metal type newspapers or cold type, but on a personal computer. This tabloid was put together that way. Second, a little bit of history in the making. Microsoft did their very first initial public offering, which I was quite surprised that it was 1986 when they finally did that. Another thing that was big, Hands Across America fundraiser. Over 5 million people joined hands across the country in an effort to fight hunger and homelessness. Amazing what happens when people get together. One thing that I was quite surprised was the Oprah Winfrey Show was introduced in 1986. Okay. And then MacGroup Detroit was founded. And that's the reason why we're here today. So. Next up, Apple products for 1986. So a little trip down memory lane. Apple II GS, Macintosh 512, System Software 1.0. Now, System Software 0.7 was also introduced this year, but I think System Software 1.0 is a little more relevant. Also, the Apple Desktop Bus Mouse and Keyboard combination. Instead of having the little plug that looked like a phone jack, you actually had what was considered our proprietary plug setup. And then the LaserWriter Plus. Up at the top, you can see the 512 with the LaserWriter connected to it. The Apple II GS was a wonderful piece of advice or hardware. And then that is what System 1 looked like. It brought the Finder to us, which is fantastic. Moving on, in 1991, Dr. Jack Kevorkian. At that year, the Michigan courts barred him from assisted suicides. It's hard to think that far back. The second one surprised the heck out of me. Starbucks opens in California. California is what saved Starbucks, believe it or not. They had been around since the 70s up in the Northwest, but they were struggling. Until they moved into California, they were barely making it. But at that point in time, that revitalized the company, and well, now they're on every corner. My kids enjoyed this one, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It took me a minute to went, that was 1991? And so that's when it first came to America. So that was amazing. Personally, one of the things I cared about, Space Lab was launched. The shuttle Columbia carried Space Lab into orbit in June of 1991. And then the Cold War officially ends. On December 31st of that year, all Soviet institutions ceased operations. They became their own countries, which I thought was pretty amazing as well. Apple products for 1991, Macintosh Classic 2, the Macintosh Quadra series, the 700 and the 900 series. So some heavy-duty towers that a lot of people used and enjoyed. System Software 7.0. Pretty surprising. And then the first true portable computers from Apple would have been the PowerBook 100, 140, and 170 series. Truly amazing. Even though Apple did have the Apple Portable, it was not really what you would call a portable machine. It was pretty much a tower that had a handle on it. And there was a screen built into it.
Only weighed 17 pounds.
Yeah, awfully heavy. And then the personal LaserWriter LS series, which is just a fantastic way for people to get out of dot matrix and get into something that looked good. The next one I had a little help with. Mike was very generous to offer some photos from something he had emailed out to some people. The image that's on the left in grayscale showed production work for what Mike did and for what I did for a number of years. No. So these were mainframe type systems for doing typesetting and all the work that was involved. You had somebody entering text or pretty much entering code at the time to create the text. You had people that would have to photograph the images that were going into, say, printed material. You had people that would have to physically write the copy and then get it set in a typesetter, then print it out to be proofread, and then put out on photo paper so it could then be keylined, which the board on the bottom with the chair is a typical keyline table where you would take a board out, lay everything up, so that way it'd be ready for the printer. The machine that's in blue up in the top is what started my parents' business. It's a CompuGraphic 7700. This was in the basement of our house when we lived in Huntington Woods. And that's where my parents' business started. That machine was $200,000 back in 1975. That machine helped my parents raise 4 children. My dad had worked downtown at Michigan Type, and he was in the cold type division because they also did hot type. They did ads for the newspapers. My dad used, one of his clients was J. Walter Thompson, and would go and visit the guys there and get jobs from them and take it back. I remember visiting Michigan Type downtown and walking into a room the size of a gymnasium that had air conditioning, and this was in hot July. And there's all these punch cards and all these spinning gears and stuff on all these machines filling the walls. And they would take a full-page newspaper ad, and it would take them 8 hours to render that ad for a full-page ad in the Free Press or the news. The picture below, I believe, was from Mike, and that again shows a keylining table for all the drawing that you would do. So your illustration work would handle there. You would lay out your type on there from what you had printed off. You leaned over a table a lot. So there was a lot of things that were involved in that type of business. Now, you can do everything on this. Or an iPad is what we're now seeing.
Can I just share a thought? That picture, the blue one,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if everyone here realizes, but that screen is not the computer. That's just the screen. The giant
Yes.
thing behind and to the left is the computer. So to
Yes.
give you some perspective, it was like almost the size of like a washing machine.
Actually, it was like the size of a large desk, the whole unit, to get that. The screen was just up top. On the side, like Steve was saying, there was a cassette that held the photo paper, and then there was a box of photo paper below it, and you would feed it up, get it all ready to go. You'd advance a couple of feet because you had waste. And inside, there was 2 rolls of fonts. They were on photographic strips, and you mounted them on this great big wheel, clipped them in, and that thing spun around, and it shot light every so often, and that's how it would work. It was a lot of effort, and that was just the start of the process. Moving on to 1996. Motorola StarTech. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. A wearable phone. Boy, that's amazing. It was the first wearable cellular phone, smallest and lightest at that time. Next, a little sadness. And I heard this as the meeting started off earlier today. Amber Hagerman was a young girl that was murdered in Arlington, Texas that year. She was a victim of that, and she's the namesake of Amber Alerts. So just a little history on that. But it was one of those, my wife yesterday was, why is my phone ringing off like this? Because there was an Amber Alert yesterday, and apparently there was one today. It is a feature that you can turn on or off on your iPhone, and that is completely up to your conscience on what you want to do. Next, Deep Blue. Can I see a show of hands of people who know what Deep Blue is? I thought that would be it. Yeah, another small gymnasium machine. But its claim to fame was it beat Garry Kasparov, the chess master, for the very first time. So artificial intelligence is on its way. It's been around. Next, Dolly the sheep. I get to make fun of my brother-in-law because of this, because he's Scottish and I'm Irish. So we tease him all the time. Oh, you're going to get a new pet? You're going to name it Dolly? But Dolly was the first mammal to be successfully cloned from an adult cell. Amazing what technology does. It's my understanding that there is a field of Dollys now, all again cloned from that same cell. And then a little bit of news. Next Computers was sold to Apple at the end of this year. What does that foretell? As far as Apple products go, there was the PowerBook 1400 CS, which was my father's very first portable Mac. It was a delightful machine, and it came with sheets of paper so you could slide it in on the cover to give it a different look. We always thought that was pretty funny. The PowerMac 6400, which was a fantastic tower that actually had a built-in subwoofer. So it was one of the very first ones where if you hooked up speakers to it, you actually got good sound through the speakers and the subwoofer on it. A personal favorite of mine would be the message pads, the 130 or the 2000. So this was Newton technology and software that Apple had been putting together. Some of the very first PDAs that were ever there. Whenever you email something on your iPhone or your iPad and you hear the little whoosh sound, this is where it came from. When you throw something in the trash and empty it, and you hear the crumpled paper, this is where it came from. It's amazing. This was back from '96. They started the Newton project back in '93. It disappeared in '98 because somebody came back to a company. Then there was one of the very first workgroup servers that Apple put out, the 8550, a very massive box, very, very large. Almost washing machine size, would you say? Close enough. Yeah.
Minus 2 towers.
Yes.
Microwave.
Yeah. And then there was the Performa 5400, which was used in schools all over the place. It was one of the very first all-in-ones that had speakers built into it, and a CD drive. It was very, very popular in the school market. And I hear another alert. Okay. The large photo on the left is the Performa 6400. I bought a number of these for my kids. To my dismay, I did not buy them headphones. I should have, because they really liked playing their different types of music through it that I wasn't a big fan of. The Message Pad 2000 was the second to last Newton that was out. The 2100 was amazingly fast. They say that the Message Pad 2000 actually had more power than the first Macintosh in a handheld device. And then the 1400 is below. It had swappable batteries and drives in it, which was really a nifty thing. You could put your CDs in, you could put in your zip drive, you could put in your floppy. They gave you the technology. Or if you looked for a long way, you would pop in 2 batteries.
They were still up.
Yes, they are amazing. Okay, 2001, getting a little more current. AOL and Time Warner merge, creating a very large powerhouse company. But then again, this was probably at the start of the dot-com burst. That bubble burst shortly thereafter, but then things picked back up again. Another thing that I found amazing was the first artificial heart was used. A gentleman named Robert Tools had the very first artificial heart implanted, and it was successful. This one, Operation Buccaneer. Does anybody know what this is about? Okay, cool. I was hoping I could stump somebody finally.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
No, not Pirates of the Caribbean. The U.S. Customs Office raided the members of a group called Do or Die. They were an international software piracy group. And at that time, this was the biggest bust that they had ever made on software piracy. And I thought that would be relevant with our group. Next, Kofi Annan with the United Nations won the Nobel Prize for Peace. And then, the United States versus Microsoft. I had forgotten about this. Back in 2000 and 2001, the United States was going after Microsoft for monopoly. And a number of companies were with the US on this one. Apple included, along with a few other companies, because Microsoft had wanted Internet Explorer on anything, and they wanted to get paid for it as well. The US finally decided, after lots of court time, that they were not going to try and break up Microsoft anymore, that they were going to go after a lesser antitrust penalty. Many people in the legal field say that Microsoft got off with a slap on the wrist, but that's old history at this point in time. They are still who they are. Apple products for 2001 were very, very interesting. We had the first iBook that was the 12-inch model. Before then, they were the colorful iBooks that sort of resembled a toilet seat. I personally have a number of those. I like them a lot just because of the different colors. But it was a USB model that was just fantastic. It was also the first year for OS X. And there was actually 2 releases that year. 10.0, known as Cheetah, and then 10.1, known as Puma. So 10.0 came out, I believe it was March of the year, and Puma showed up in November. So that was the first where we went from, well, Apple bought a company called Next and took some of their software and turned it into what we currently use today. The next item is a Power Mac G4 Cube. How many people have had one? Awesome. The plexiglass? Yep, I don't blame you. The Cube was a really great device, very well ahead of its time. However, it was expensive. And unfortunately, it didn't stay long in the market. The next thing that came up was the PowerBook G4, or I believe the titanium book. This was probably Apple's real start into heavy-duty portable processing power at that point in time. And then, the next thing up was the iPod. Amazing what a little tiny device can do for you. It was probably Apple's turnaround product at that point in time. Yes, the G3 iMac had been out and was quite successful, but we were still a small company at that time. The iPod changed everything. At $399, you had a 5 gig music player in your pocket. Does anybody know the code name for the first iPod? Didn't have a number. It had a name. No looking it up. It was called Dulcimer, which when you think about it, you got a musical product. Pretty darn good. The next slide up, I don't know if you can read it very well. So this was something that Mike and I had a good discussion over, this comic strip. Talking about how technology is changing the job market. Sure, I'd be happy to. Give me a sec here. I'm going to turn around. Yeah. Okay. So it starts off with, you wanted to see me, Jim? Yeah, come here, Ben. Take a look down on the floor. See the guy with the glasses? He's a temp. He's an experienced creative director. And he's working on a small in-house publishing project for us. His salary is low. He gets no training, no health benefits, no vacations, and no sick days. In short, he's the perfect employee. And he's inspired me to rethink the future. Ben, I decided to fire everyone, all 6,500 employees of the Universal Petroleum, and then rehire the core players on a consultant basis I figure the move will cut operating expenses by at least a third, maybe even 40%. What do you think? What do I think? It's brilliant, big guy. It's a simple but bold visionary strategy for the 21st century. Naturally, I love it. When do we start? We? And if you look on the screen, it says, project completed, please clean out your desk. So, this strip, while amusing, unfortunately is extremely accurate. It's very, very true. I'm sure many of us have seen how technology has changed the workplace and how it's affected everyone for good and maybe not so good. I know that in my career in printing and in typesetting, this kind of stuff happened all day long. And it was a great ride while it lasted, but things change. And with things changing, you have to move forward. So, moving forward, we're going to go to 2006. That was the year of Mozart's 250th birthday. There was huge celebrations in Salzburg and other cities across the world celebrating his birth. This one's for Calvin. Twitter founded and launched this year, exclamation mark. Count them, 40 characters. Just because.
Okay.
Sort of a pun.
Well, 40 is.
Paul McCartney in 2006. We're all familiar with Sir Paul. He turned 64. Which makes you ask, will you still feed me? Will you still need me when I'm 64?
You know who was the man before Wings?
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, the Quarrymen or something, I think it was. Yeah. Maybe that was too early. I don't know. An Inconvenient Truth, the movie documentary, came out in 2001. It's a documentary about global warming, if you're not familiar with it. It was about Al Gore in a slideshow that he would show people about global warming. And so they then turned it into a movie. So, yeah, pretty much it was in Keynote. I remember seeing pictures of, I think at the time, his office showing like 3 30-inch cinema displays, which was just, wow, okay, he's got lots of room.
We should all be underwater now.
You would think. And then,
Drive 3 30-inch displays.
well, hopefully he had enough power where he was at. And then 300 million. This number is significant because that's how many people were in the United States that year. We hit 300 million people. So 2006 pretty much was all about the numbers. Next up, Apple products for that year. Apple got rid of the plastic cinema displays and went to the aluminum style. They started off with the 30-inch screens, followed by the 23 and the 20-inch screens not too far after. It was also the year of Intel becoming part of Apple. The Intel iMacs, still in white plastic, like the G5s. The MacBook. Goodbye iBook, hello MacBook. I have a real quick story about the MacBook when it came out. At the time, I was working at the Somerset store, and I was just a sales specialist, and it was 8:30 in the morning, and there is a line of people outside of our store. It's a Wednesday. There's never a line of people outside of a store on a Wednesday at an Apple store. And we don't open till 9. And they are just, they're there, and they want in. And we're like, well, what are you guys doing here? We're here for the MacBook. What MacBook? because we had no knowledge of this. And they're like, the MacBook, they announced it this morning at 8 o'clock. And we're like, what? And we went over to a computer and pulled up the website, and son of a gun, we're now selling MacBooks. They left disappointed because we did not have any of them yet. Although we did take name and numbers, and when shipment showed up later in the afternoon, we started making phone calls. I'm pretty sure the longest person to get back to the store was an hour because he had to wait for his workday to end to get back. Next up, iPod Nano. As Apple called it, 1,000 songs in your pocket. And not your pants pocket, but your keys pocket, because it was so small and thin. Again, does anybody know the code name for this iPod? Okay, it was called Drifter, which when you think about how small and light it was, yeah, that's not a bad way to go. And then the iPod Hi-Fi, one of my personal favorite Apple products that I still have and still use. Apple decided to get into the boombox market with this, probably because Bose had been doing quite well with their sound dock systems. This thing was 15 pounds without the batteries in it. It took 6 D-cell batteries, right, to run it. And so, yeah, this was not a truly a carry-around kind of thing. Apple tried to present it as a way to replace your home stereo. Not the best ad campaign for that one. But it did have amazing sound. Moving on, a milestone for Apple yet again. In 2007, the iPhone was released. I think we can all agree that for technology and for Apple computers, this was a game changer all the way around. Followed up a few years later in 2010 by the iPad. This device, in my mind, allows people not to fear using a computer, because the people that were afraid of sitting down at a keyboard with a mouse could pick this up and within a matter of minutes navigate themselves around with just their finger and go from there. I have also seen where this has worked for people with disabilities beyond wildest expectations. My son used to care for a young man that had autism. And when his parents got him an iPad, it was night and day on bringing him out of his shell and bringing him back into the world that you and I know. So, an amazing product, hands down. I reached out to a number of people, letting them know about our 30th anniversary. And Andy Anako, who was a writer for Macworld magazine and does a number of podcasts and is guests on a number of podcasts about technology, was back and forth with me, and just hopefully we were going to see a video clip from him. But it didn't work out that way. So he just asked me to extend his congratulations to the group on 30 years, and he hopes, as I said earlier, we get another 30 out of it. 2011, Space Shuttle program retires. The Space Shuttle Atlantis lands successfully, ending the program of the Space Shuttle service. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, highest grossing film of the year. My children dragged me to this movie because I have to admit, if somebody can write something that kids want to read and it's 2 or 3 inches thick, I am all for it. And it was fantastic that my kids passed the books down, one to the other, read all the books, and when the movies came out, we got to go to the movie, Dad. and we did that. But the fact that it was the highest grossing movie that year is just truly amazing. The next part, to come back on the first part, the Oprah Winfrey Show ends after 25 years. So, we have something on Oprah. We lasted longer. Next, Detroit Tigers.
Are we all getting cards?
Look under your seat. The Detroit Tigers were Central Division champs for all the baseball fans in the group. Darn Rangers, they kept us from going to the World Series because it could have been 1968 all over again because the Cardinals went on to win. And then the sadness part of the year, Steve Jobs passed away from extended illness. And the world is probably a little sadder because of it. As far as Apple products go for that year, 2011 was the last year that a number of Apple products shipped with an optical drive. So you could, in 2011, you could still get an iMac or a Mac Mini. No, excuse me, not a Mac Mini. An iMac, MacBook Pro with an optical drive in it. In 2012, that changed. With the MacBook Pro Retina models coming out, the optical drive was removed. With the iMacs that came out, the optical drive was removed. The optical drive was removed out of the Mac Mini as well in the 2011 year. And so that's where we were. Now, the exception to that rule is the 2012 13-inch MacBook Pro with the normal screen. That still ships with an optical drive, although a lot of people have rumored that it's probably not much longer for life due to the fact that Apple's probably going to run out of those optical drives eventually, and everything needs to be thinner, according to Johnny Ives. So, next on the list, Apple came out with the 27-inch Thunderbolt display that replaced the 27-inch Cinema display. So while the plug was the same for your mini DisplayPort, now you had the ability to plug in Thunderbolt drives into your display and take advantage of that speed, which is quite fast. Next up, iOS 5 for the phones and the iPads. And then macOS 10.7, or Lion, as it's known. That was released that year. A lot of people liked it, some people didn't. But we've moved forward. And then also, we had the iPhone 4S, and the iPad 2 was released that year. So. Right. Well, Lion was available, because 10.6 still shipped on a DVD disc. Lion was a download. People with MacBook Airs actually got a small little thumb drive with their Air to restore the system if they needed to. So that's pretty neat. Since we are starting to run low on time, I had the pleasure of corresponding with Fraser Spears. Fraser and Federico Vercici host a show called Canvas. It is a podcast. If you are interested in using your iPad or your iOS devices a little more heavily, I fully encourage you to listen to these podcasts that they put out. Fraser is an educator at a private school in Scotland that exclusively uses iPads for all students and staff. I found his podcast to be quite intriguing and enlightening at the same time. It's part of the Relay FM network, and they have many, many programs related to the Apple ecosystem. So we're going to see if this is going to work. Give me a second. Oops, sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Fraser Spears and I'm very happy to give you this walkthrough of my cupboard of Apple products that lives in my mind. These are some of my favorite Apple products and they're products that have kind of remained with me, if you like, over all the years, even since they have been long obsoleted by newer technology. The first product I wanted to talk about was the Apple Style Writer 2. Maybe a strange choice to start with. Why not start with the original Mac or something? But this was the first printer that we owned at home. It was paired along with the Performer 450 Mac, or LC2 as you might know it. We kind of hate printers today, but there was really something magical about being able to make something in the world from computer commands, even if it was just a printed page. And of course, do you remember the sound that it made? I mean, just like my 56k modem connection sound, I can really hear in my head right now the sound that the Style Writer 2 made as it was starting up, as it was printing out. I'm sure many of you who had that printer can remember that too. The first Mac in my sort of memory collection is the Performer 6400 180. And this was my senior years of high school computer. It was Apple's first consumer Mac tower, and it was a computer that took me through those years of high school. When I got it, it had shipped with System 7.5, and it had a maddening habit of just freezing constantly when connecting to the internet. I mean, these were early days of the consumer internet. And this machine was not really quite up to it. I think the software was just a little buggy at the time. I remember there being a choice of maybe 2 different modems you could get in this computer, and I had the misfortune to get the one that didn't really work very well. So that was my joy with the 6400. But it looked like a lot of computer at the time, and was, I think, the first Mac ever to feature a subwoofer in the tower. It had great sound. I mean, that was definitely the best part of the entire experience of owning the Performer 6400 180. The stereo speakers in the monitor, subwoofer in the tower, sounded great. My university computer was a PowerMac G3 desktop, a beige one, before they went colour. I studied software engineering at university, and this Mac spent at least as much time booted into MK Linux as it did in any Apple operating system of the time. This was the machine that I learned to face the fear of disk partitioning and do it anyway. And this was really before we had live repartitioning. You were really genuinely blowing away everything that you had before and writing down a partition map on the disk and then installing various weird versions of Linux. Who can forget where they were the first time they saw the iMac G3? The design still holds up today. It's an absolute classic, and it really deserves a place in history alongside the original Macintosh as a machine that changed the industry again. If you've lived through those days, you'll remember just how many things were Bondi blue at the time. Things like irons and kettles turned Bondi blue and white, and almost in tribute to the design genius of the Mac. This was also the machine that we started deploying at the school where I now work. In 1999, we had 4 of those multicolored iMacs. I have some great memories of trying to administer a network of 4 machines and a server. But even in 1999, we were a school that was trying to do things a little ahead of what everybody else was doing. So in 1999, most people's idea of a multi-user computer system in a school was to have a PC with a box of floppy disks beside it, and that was your multi-user system. We had a server G3 and 4 Macs, and using macOS 9 on the clients and macOS 10 Server 1.0, which we'll talk about in a second, we had one of the first common desktop login systems in our local area. I think it's important to remember the software along the way too. The server that ran those colored iMacs was running macOS 10 Server 1.0, which was basically a Nextstep OS with some Mac Platinum makeup splashed on the top. If you remember, this was the first product after Apple bought Next. And I was administering this system in 1999, and I still remember well the late nights trying to understand enough of SendMail to get email working for the school. I'm really very grateful these days for Google Apps for Education, because it's taken away all of those email pains, and now I just click a button and people get email kits. Wonderful times to be alive. Another great Apple milestone, of course, was macOS 10. And I still consider macOS 10 to be one of the greatest feats of commercial software engineering that was ever delivered. It wasn't without its bumps along the way, but in the form of Carbon, Apple's team delivered something that we were all certain simply couldn't be done. The Mac Toolbox, or most of it, running on a preemptive multitasking protected memory Unix kernel. And it worked. And many of the apps that we knew came along for the ride. Carbonized apps, if you remember those. Oh, and of course, this thing called Cocoa came along for the ride as well. I wonder where that went. Great as these enhancements to Macs were, they were altogether as nothing compared to the social and cultural impact of the iPhone. There's never been anything like it before, and Apple's current problem is that there will very likely never be anything like it again. Many revolutionary ideas seem absurd when you first see them, but the phone didn't come into that category. For me, it was obvious from the very first time we saw Swipe to Unlock that this was a game changer in the absolute fullest sense, that everything we knew was reset to zero, and this thing was going to change the world again. If you remember the event at which the iPhone was announced as well, to me that still stands as one of the greatest feats of public speaking, of public persuasion, of product explanation that has ever been done in the industry. It was a masterclass of presentation from Steve Jobs, and the product lived up to the hype as well. Now let's talk about iPad, because this is the product that changed the course of my career. At school, I had been working and teaching computer science for about 4 years by the time the iPad was announced, and in all those years, I had been looking for something to use as a one-to-one computer for schools. I looked at all kinds of laptops, netbooks, even video iPods, but none of them were just quite right for school. But when I saw the iPad, I knew this was it. It took the ease of use of an iPhone with the screen of a netbook, except that you could bear to look at it for more than 5 minutes, and it packaged it all up into something with a 10-hour battery life, which at the time was unheard of. And that was a product that we could afford. The iPad was announced in January of 2010. We decided to go one-to-one at Cedars in June of that year, and we opened in the 2010-2011 school year as the world's first whole school one-to-one iPad program. We haven't gone back from that since then. Right now I'm sitting here doing a little bit of work trying to get ready for our migration over to iPad Pros this summer, and by the time that lease runs out, we will have been 9 years on the road of being a one-to-one iPad school. I feel the iPad 2 is worth a mention, as we've rarely seen such a significant year-over-year improvement in an Apple product line. There's a reason the iPad 2 hung around for so long. It was just a great, great device. Now to a couple of more modern products. The first one, the Apple Pencil, I feel is another game changer. We've all used various iPad styli in the past, and they've all been uniformly terrible. Some better than others, yes, but most of them were akin to writing with a paintbrush. Apple Pencil takes that experience and makes it basically indistinguishable from actual physical ink. I think it's a phenomenal breakthrough product, and it's something that I think we'll see much more use of as time goes on. But I'd like to finish with Apple Watch. I adore my Apple Watch. I bought it on the first day it shipped, and I haven't lived a day without it since. Neither would I want to. It's the first Apple product I touch in the morning and the last one I touch at night. I've chosen the sport model specifically because I honestly believe it's the best Apple Watch there is. It's light, discreet, affordable. I love seeing how people put together combinations of watch cases, bands, faces, complications, and face colors. It's so personalized, and I find it fascinating just to observe the different combinations people put together of Apple Watch. Now, I live a very scheduled life as a teacher, and a lot of information flies my way each day at school. I call the Apple Watch an awareness amulet. It tells me what's coming up, tells me what just happened sometimes, and it keeps me ready for almost anything. We're really only at the beginning of what a body-mounted computer can do as a proxy for your identity, for authorization, and for financial transactions. With watchOS 3 coming out, I really can't wait to see where Apple goes with the Apple Watch. I think it's one to watch. Thanks everybody, and congratulations on such a great milestone for your group. Have a great year.
All right. And so you can replay this once we post it up if you have trouble understanding his Scottish accent. Because I would say you probably would like to hear what he had to say maybe a little more clearly. I suggest headphones. It'll probably be a little easier. Fraser also has now moved his school over into iPad Pros, and all the iPads that they currently had, the leasing company that they were working with offered them a really great deal on all of them, and he started a fundraiser so that all these iPads that they had been using, which were iPad 2s, are being shipped to India to be used for women learning how to handle the solar farming industry that is starting in India. And so they did a fundraiser to pay for all these iPads. I was going to give off the website to let people know that if they wanted to donate, they could, but he hit his funding goal about a week and a half ago. So they have it fully funded. They're sending off all these iPads to these women in these poor areas of India to help them get job skills to go from there. So it's amazing that you can still recycle some of the products for good. Another podcast that I highly recommend people to look into if you want to go a little further with your Macintosh or your iOS devices as well is the Mac Power Users. Katie Floyd and David Sparks put on a very, very entertaining podcast that is typically about an hour and a half long, sometimes a little longer. Katie is a Star Trek geek, and David is a Star Wars geek. It makes for interesting conversations. And then, next up, where do we go from here? As far as technology goes, home automation is coming up. It's already out there for a lot of people. It's amazing what it can do. I'm going to have an upcoming meeting on home automation and show some of the things that I use in my home, some of the things Terry uses in his home, and some of the things that are also available out there for home automation. Mobile devices, such as iPads and iPhones, I think they're going to continue to be further the most popular devices, maybe even replacing computers at some point in time. Health and wellness tracking is the future is there. I believe that's going to happen just due to the Apple Watch alone. Cloud-based storage. A number of people are going to cloud-based storage and doing that. I don't need a big hard drive in my computer anymore because I can have all my stuff up on the cloud. The iCloud Photos library allows people to have all their pictures on their iPad or their iPhone because they can have their computer sync with that cloud-based service and go from there. You can also do that. This presentation today is on my iCloud drive. My keynote presentations all live up there. They don't live on the computer, which makes it a little odd sometimes if I want to copy it someplace. But it's working out so far. And then another thing, because we are the Motor City, transportation, electric vehicles, whether it's an automobile or a motorcycle, it's there. Even autonomous vehicles. There are rumors that Apple is working in that market. Google is working in that market. And even the big auto companies are testing that as well. So that's where we are with that.